2012, my wife and I were living in a 700 square foot bungalow with our first child. As we were planning our second child, our home was growing smaller and we dreamed of more space where our kids could be animals. At the time, I was working at an architecture firm doing public projects. Working in the building industry from 2008 to 2012 was rough. The work was satisfying, consisting mainly of LEED certified buildings, but the quantity of work was lean. After years of part-time unemployment and constant prodding, I convinced my wife that it would be beneficial for us to build our own house. So now that we are committed, what was this house going to be? At first, I was designing a project that would simply suit the needs of our growing family, but would adapt over time, allowing the house to shrink as our kids left and our spatial needs diminished. But then the decision was made. Not only was I going to build my own house and have a second child, but I would start my own firm, and this project would be an example defining how this new firm would work within the city. The firm would be called Bundled Design Studio and would focus on a design process that bundled together multiple services, considering projects cohesive wholes rather than fragmented pieces. The best example of this are living buildings. As a firm, Bundled's long-term goal would to become experts in this field. So our new objective became to build a project as close to the living building challenge as possible, identifying pathways and barriers along the way. Now, this might be preaching to the choir, but I would like to walk through the living building challenge as it relates to the Birch Case Study House. The challenge is comprised of 7 performance categories or petals: place, water, energy, health and happiness, materials, equity, and beauty. I want to highlight a few of these. First, place. My wife and I wanted to live in one of Bellingham's historic neighborhoods close to work, services, and the rest of our community. The lot we found was a rare infill lot in Birchwood neighborhood. The neighborhood consists of large lots, allowing us to have chickens, gardens, and an orchard that lines the driveway. In the past, the property appears to have been a tree farm with Doug firs, now 60 feet tall, planted in a perfect 10-foot grid across the half-acre site. We used the grid as a template to position the house. Just to the south, we topped the trees using the tree trunks as posts for a fence to protect the garden from deer. The back half we left undeveloped, providing habitat for owls, coyotes, rabbit, deer, and migrating birds. But the best part of the property is the location and its connection to the urban environment, with a 10-minute bike ride to the city center and half that to my wife's work at a nearby school. Net positive water. For most people, the most surprising aspect of the Birch Case Study House is that it was permitted without a connection to the municipal water or sewer systems. When I first started the permitting process, there was the assumption that we would be required a municipal connection by code. This ended up to be false. On the supply side, a rainwater catchment system provides the property with potable and non-potable water for everything from cooking and showering to landscape irrigation. The water is collected off the metal roof and stored in 2 5,000-gallon cisterns tucked in the trees. The water is then treated through filtration and UV sanitation for use throughout the house. The second most surprising feature was our choice to incorporate composting toilets into a contemporary house. We constantly questioned this decision, but eventually we decided that the composting toilets as a major water-conserving strategy. We quickly realized, however, that the sleek, well-designed European composting toilet we wanted would not be allowed. Instead, we would be limited to the Washington State list of on-site water treatment products. The choices, unlike their European counterparts, were more like a toilet seat mounted on a yard waste composter. After losing a 9-month argument with the Department of Health, I explained to my wife that a toilet the size of a Volkswagen Bug would be parked permanently in our bathroom. Being a good sport, she allowed me to move forward, knowing that in the worst case scenario, although expensive, the city sewer connection was only 200 feet away. To deal with our gray water, we also had big plans. Initially, we wanted to bring Earthship technology into a contemporary house. I designed a long linear planter that serves the entryway to the living room, kitchen, and master bedroom. We hope to dump the gray water into this space 2 feet below the surface, using the water for plants prior to its release to the septic tank and eventually a constructed wetland. Both the Department of Health and Building Department didn't like our idea, and thus the final systems looked very conventional. We did, however, still build the planter, and ironically, this has become the most well-used room in the house. There are piles of plants, including an 8-foot banana tree, papaya, lemon, lime, pineapple, peach, pomegranate, strawberries, and peppers. But there is also a rock box for the kids with dump trucks, excavators, and bulldozers. And there are steps to sit on, drink coffee, watch the kids, and gaze out into the garden through the wall of south-facing windows. Net positive energy. The house was designed in the flavor of Passive House as our major energy conserving strategy. We coupled the high-performance envelope with a CO2 heat pump and HRV to bring down the electrical demand. In the spring of 2016, we installed the solar system and are currently producing 50% more energy than we consume. We are hoping this excess production will afford us the luxury to have normal hot water sucking teenagers, get an electric car, and in the short tub, maybe a hot tub. Materials. Achieving this materials pedal was one of my primary goals, yet one that we found to be unattainable. We hoped to build exclusively with FSC wood, but found the lumber package to be too expensive with long lead times. Instead, we looked an eighth of a mile down the street to the demolition of our historic 1920s neighborhood school. During the demolition, massive piles of true dimension 2x15s were being stockpiled on site. I inquired with the contractors and bought a stack for the second floor joists. A week later, I went back for the roof structure, and then again for the ground floor. At the end of demolition, the contractor called me and asked if I would buy the entire pile, over 100 24-foot 2x15s for next to nothing. I couldn't really resist. All the exposed wood in the house is made from this salvaged material. Exposed ceiling joists, cabinet faces, stair treads, handrails, decks, and shelving. Beauty. Now, I'm not going to make the case I designed an exceptional piece of aesthetic design. I'll leave that subjective discussion in your hands. However, as part of the living building beauty pedal, there is an imperative for inspiration and education. This, more than any other aspect, is where the Birch House finds its story. As a counterpoint to conventional design and development, I wanted our process to be transparent. In an effort to include our entire building industry, we formed partnerships with a number of organizations to share different features of the project. We worked with NIA as part of the Next Step Homes program to monitor the performance of our project. We partnered with WSU to be the first to test the Sandin CO2 heat pump for water heater for both space heating and domestic hot water. But closest to home, we partnered with Rose Lathrop, director of local green building nonprofit Sustainable Connections. Together with Sustainable Connections, Bundle hosted a workshop series on the latest in high-performance building. The workshop series gave us the opportunity to host typical classroom presentations, immediately followed by a site visit to the Birch House to see materials and techniques in a real-world application. Beyond the partnerships, the project did not build itself. I had an amazing support network that both directly and indirectly was part of this barn raising, and this reads like a huge thank you letter. To my wife, Ashley, who was willing to move into a travel trailer with a toddler and endured an absent husband for most of the process. To Tretwold Construction, my contractor, together we walked step by step through the learning process of high-performance building, all while teaching me the basics of framing. To Adair Orr, who at the time was my business partner, held Bundle together. He now has his own firm, Armadillo Design Lab, and you should check him out. To Heath, my #1 volunteer, who was, when not working as a biologist, just on site, learning about building and pounding nails. To the Quigley family, who pulled my pregnant wife out of the travel trailer, gave us months of free rent, and allowed us to unexpectedly deliver our second child on the floor of their extra bedroom. And to my in-laws, the Whiteheads, for getting an apartment so that they could hang out with their grandchildren and keep us from moving back into the trailer, now with 2 kids. And to my father-in-law, who helped with everything from sanding joists to painting drywall. And to my family, the Welches, who traveled from Montana and Idaho to help install electrical, tile, and HRV. And to many more people that I surely don't have time to list, I thank you all. It is within these thank yous that the true spirit of the Living Building Challenge comes to life. At times it literally takes a village, and this project is a perfect example of how a community came together, creating the freedom to pursue a dream. Within this support, I found commitment not only to my friends and family, but the process to create the best damn project I could have at the time. Thank you.